Worsening conditions hampering efforts to bring devastating bushfires under control on Perth's outskirts. Charges laid against Aung Sun Suu Kyi and the toppled president Win Myint. But what do they mean? IOC officials outline how they plan to present a COVID-safe Tokyo Olympics. And is it game over for Israel Folau as the Dragons pull out of their bid to get the controversial star to their club?
This is SBS World News with Darren Mara.
Good evening. We start tonight in Western Australia, where at least 71 homes have been lost. A number, it's feared, will rise in the coming days. Conditions are expected to worsen tonight, with a change of wind direction placing properties under threat west of the current fire zone. The fire has now affected 10,000 hectares northeast of Perth. Residents in Shady Hills Estate and Bullsbrook have been told to enact their bushfire plans. Western Australia correspondent Aaron Fernandez joins me now live from an evacuation centre in Swan View. And Aaron, firefighters are facing difficult conditions this evening.
Yeah, that's right, Darren. Winds are picking up this evening, and that's pushing this fire towards communities in Shady Hills Estate, Bullsbrook, as well as Joshua Mews and Avon Ridge. Last night, the cooler evening temperatures did allow firefighters to contain the blaze, but they face a much more difficult challenge this evening. Here's Department of Fire and Emergency Services Craig Waters speaking this afternoon.
It's so big because the fire's been spotting well ahead of the main head fire, so I think we've seen spotting activity 3.5 kilometres ahead of the main head fire. So we just want to make sure that the community is well prepared and they're fully up to date with the current warnings.
And Darren, it was a heartbreaking day for evacuees at the evacuation centre here today. The number of homes that have been lost, confirmed as lost, absolutely shocking. Authorities are now going through the process of notifying each of those families. Many of the evacuees still don't know what the status of their properties are. But as today ended, there are still no reports of anyone missing or any loss of life. Here's how the day unfolded. A black sky over the Perth Hills and a warning: you are in danger and need to act immediately to survive. And residents did just that.
At present, for my area, there's imminent risk, so we're being told not to go back.
For those who stayed in Shady Hills Estate and Bullsbrook this afternoon, it was a race to evacuate.
Well, look, I back onto Walyunga Park, so the property will burn to the ground if it breaks those containment lines.
Some stayed to protect their properties and livestock. Local and state governments will coordinate to rescue animals impacted by the blaze. Fire crews are working on containment lines, fighting 70-kilometre-an-hour winds and searing heat.
That northwest corner of the fire is extremely difficult to control in incredibly steep terrain. We're unable to get earth-moving equipment in there.
More than 400 people are in 3 evacuation centres across Perth. Hundreds waited under 35-degree heat in Swanview today, prevented from going back into the fire zone and unsure if their homes have been lost.
There isn't really a time frame for us to be able to have an idea of when we'll be back.
Dozens of families don't have a place to return to.
Homes and memories going up in flames. It's terribly sad. People doing everything they can to defend their homes.
With hundreds of people sent to evacuation centres like this one and the number of homes destroyed expected to rise, both the state and federal governments today announced financial support packages for those affected.
This is $1,000 per adult and $400 per child. This is simply to give them some dignity and respect in a trying time.
Cloaked in smoke, Perth City and surrounds are still in COVID lockdown.
We've got a bushfire, we've got a COVID pandemic, and there's an impending cyclone, and we still get through with a sense of grit and resilience.
Which will be crucial in days ahead. Rain is not forecast until Sunday. Aaron Fernandez, SBS World News.
Abroad, and Myanmar's military leader continues to tighten his grip on power and ignore international pressure to relinquish control. And in just the last couple of hours, the Reuters news agency says it's seen a leaked police document indicating obscure charges have been laid against Aung Sun Suu Kyi and the toppled president, Win Myint. Joining us now from Yangon in Myanmar is one of the few Western journalists based in the country, Ali Fowl. Ali, concerning reports, what can you tell us about these charges?
Well, Aung San Suu Kyi has been charged under the Import-Export Act. I've also seen the document you're referring to. It's been shared by some NLD members to journalists. It's an official police charge sheet requesting the court to keep Aung San Suu Kyi and the president in remand for 2 weeks. So this Import-Export Act, apparently it's because they found some communication equipment in her home. This is a notorious act and notorious law that was used repeatedly under the former military regime to create political prisoners, because it's an incredibly broadly written law and it can be used to arrest almost anyone for almost anything. And so that's what she's been charged under. The president's been charged under the Natural Disasters Act for breach of COVID regulations, which is also in itself ridiculous, because in the last week we've seen protests of many people, hundreds of people, pro-military protests coming, or protests against the election, coming up in the weeks leading up to the coup, and even in the last couple of days since the coup. And there's been no repercussions, no arrests, nothing like that. There's been very little crackdown generally on breaches of COVID laws. So both of these charges seem clear. Clearly, they're being used as an excuse to keep them under remand, perhaps until further charges can be found. The NLD offices were raided today. They took computers, they took documents, so maybe they're looking for more. And also, the army, the military, have created a new Union Election Commission to investigate the allegations of fraud and charges against NLD MPs and members. So we'll likely see more charges brought against other NLD leaders and Aung San Suu Kyi and the former president, the ousted president, in the days and weeks to come.
Ali, would you expect to see any further protest action as a result of these charges you mentioned?
Well, I do think that it's likely to cause a lot of outrage, although I suppose to an extent it's probably been expected. No one was, very few people were expecting Aung San Suu Kyi to be released imminently. The military have announced that they're going to keep control for a year, declare a state of emergency for a year, and so that legitimizes them taking control over the country for a year, and after that they'll have elections. But if they do have elections and Aung San Suu Kyi is free to contest, she will likely win again. She remains incredibly popular, and so her popularity may lead to protests. We've already seen some defiance, and we'll see how that escalates in the days to come.
OK, Ali Fowl, thank you very much. That's Ali Fowl, a Western journalist in Yangon. Well, the Prime Minister has publicly rebuked his outspoken backbencher Craig Kelly for spreading misinformation about coronavirus treatments. Scott Morrison today hauled the MP into his office to be reprimanded, but only after a heated exchange between Mr Kelly and a Labor frontbencher.
Tanya's normally
clashing in the corridor.
Are you making any big announcements?
Yes, I'm actually telling them that the PM has to stop you spreading these crazy conspiracy theories.
The confrontation playing out for minutes in front of the cameras and from every angle. Labor frontbencher Tanya Plibersek pulling up Liberal MP Craig Kelly.
My mum lives in your electorate and I don't want her exposed to people who are not going to be vaccinated
listen to Robert,
because of these crazy conspiracy theories that you're spreading.
Well, you're the one doing that because you are the one spreading this information.
Exasperation and frustration.
Listen to our most senior immunologist.
So your Prime Minister is wrong, is he?
No, Prime Minister's 100% right.
But Mr Kelly has been contradicting his leader and the nation's health experts by peddling unproven coronavirus treatments.
I agree with your Prime Minister and your Health Minister.
Stop spreading this information.
Do you agree with your Prime Minister and your Health Minister?
The backbencher sparked controversy again this week by appearing on a podcast with former celebrity chef chef and anti-vaxxer Pete Evans. Mr Kelly, though, is unrepentant.
I believe in a free democracy.
Labor has been calling on the Prime Minister to publicly denounce the MP.
It's beyond time. The Prime Minister told Craig Kelly to just shut up.
Up until now, the PM had resisted, but this encounter becoming too much, hauling the backbencher in for a dressing down and ordering him to stop spreading views contrary to the accepted medical advice. Mr Morrison eventually distancing himself from the backbencher.
It is true that views expressed by the member for Hughes do not align with my views or the views of the advice that has been provided to me by the Chief Medical Officer.
I welcome the belated statements of the Prime Minister in distancing himself from the comments of the member for Hughes. I hope that today sees an end to the disinformation.
Craig Kelly was also told his actions are negatively impacting the government's vaccine strategy. For now, he's agreed to restrain his social media use.
I'm a proud defender of free speech, but on this one, Craig's on his own.
While becoming increasingly isolated, some coalition colleagues have jumped to his defence. Nationals MP George Christensen, himself accused of spreading misinformation, says his colleague has been censored. And this from Senator Matt Canavan. I think we need more Craig Kellys willing to say unpopular things. Silenced for now, but the echoes remain. Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
Well, today was supposed to be the day Victorians celebrated 28 days of zero community transmission of COVID-19, widely regarded as the benchmark for successful elimination. But it was revealed the UK variant of the virus has been transmitted between rooms in hotel quarantine.
A family staying at Melbourne's Park Royal tested positive last month. 4 days later, there was a positive case across the hall. Now, confirmation the cases are linked.
And the reason we are concerned is that the genomics testing of that, which came back last night, has shown that they are identical to each other. So that means it's as if people have been in the same room together.
Health authorities checked security camera footage and found there was no breach and no one left their rooms. The working theory is that the virus spread through the air.
The viral load in the room of the family of 5, because 4 of them and now 5 of them have the virus, was so high that just even opening the door to pick up your food has seen the virus get into the corridor.
To ensure it hasn't spread further, all staff and patients on that floor of the hotel have been tested again. Hotel transmission also causing concern on the other side of the country after a security guard tested positive, prompting the snap 5-day lockdown. At the time, the guard was not required to wear a face mask. Under pressure, the WA government has now tightened the rules.
We have brought into place a new policy where all people working in those hotels in a risk situation will be wearing masks.
The failure there for the government to implement that policy to make sure that hotel quarantine workers wore a mask means that now we're all wearing masks throughout this 5-day lockdown.
The Premier says he's always just followed the health advice.
I'm not a doctor. The Minister's not a doctor. We're not professors of infection. We allow the experts to run the hotels.
This is my room. Sam Prendergast is on day 8 of hotel quarantine at Perth's Hyatt Hotel. She says the nurses and hotel staff are always in PPE, but never the security guards until this week.
Every single time I open the door, they didn't have a mask on their face. They weren't holding a mask. There was no evidence of there being a mask, in their pocket or anywhere on them.
Western Australia will also move to ensure hotel quarantine workers do not work a second job. With no new cases today, the lockdown is on track to end Friday. Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
And the Victorian Department of Health says it's aware of a new positive COVID case in a hotel quarantine worker. It says public health teams are investigating and close contacts are being notified. Tokyo Olympics athletes will be tested at least every 4 days during the Games and on arrival will be required to show a negative coronavirus test taken within 72 hours of departure from home. The International Olympics Committee has released the first of its so-called playbooks, this one for international federations, that together will outline rules for athletes, officials and the media. At a media conference tonight, IOC officials said to help the Games stay COVID safe, athletes must submit an itinerary of their stay in Japan and will be advised not to use public transport without permission.
We believe that a vast majority, if not all, will follow the playbooks. However, we have, as you know, at the time of the Games, a disciplinary commission, and if push comes to shove, we have to activate the disciplinary commission, then it will be done.
For spectators, singing and chanting will be discouraged to help minimise infection. The IOC says it will decide within weeks on the overall number of spectators permitted and whether they'll include spectators from outside Japan. Italy's President Sergio Mattarella looks set to ask former European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi to form a government. Mr Mattarella summoned Mr Draghi for talks after hearing that efforts to salvage the collapsed coalition of Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte had failed. 3 people have been critically injured on a film set in Los Angeles. Locals reported an explosion in an industrial area which caused a large grass fire. Residents have been warned to stay away from the area, which is about 50 kilometres north of downtown LA. Coming up next, on again, off again, the Dragons NRL club says it's ceased discussions with Israel Folau.
My name's Max McLaughlin.
Why exactly are you here?
They help organize the German police force.
This war is not over. Just entered another phase.
Change begins in darkness.
Michael Palin reveals the incredible stories behind his most iconic adventures.
This is not for primetime television.
Michael Palin, Travels of a Lifetime, starts next Wednesday 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
Bag. And something else you don't see every day, Newcastle Permanent's 4-year fixed rate that starts with a 1. That's not bad either.
She knows where the warmest patch of floor is, but she doesn't know what fur ball means. Cats don't always know what's good for them. Lucky you do. Optimum Fur Ball formula.
Honestly, it took me all day. It's a real juggle. Just thought, wouldn't it be nice to do something special?
Riverview Farms puts in the hard work to prepare delicious, ready-to-enjoy hot roast pork. That's why telling a porky has never been so easy.
Made by Australia.
Oh, a bit of a tick. You're amazing at this. I'm a hunter, Melissa.
I got something for you.
It's such a flavour explosion.
That looks fantastic.
It's amazing.
Have a look at this. Right, let's cook.
I'd like everyone to experience something that stops them in their tracks.
It's flavour central. Yum.
This ain't no cupcake league, man. Shabam! Oh! He is ice cold!
Melbourne United versus the Perth Wildcats, Sunday at 5 on SBS Viceland and on demand.
Well, an apparent NRL comeback for controversial football star Israel Folau has been scuppered just a day after it began. St George Illawarra has abandoned its pursuit of the former dual international after a meeting of club officials this evening. The Dragons confirmed yesterday the club had inquired about signing Folau, but discussions have now ceased. Folau was sacked from the Wallabies last year after posting derogatory remarks about gay people on social media. Wealthy countries have bought the vast majority of COVID-19 vaccines, prompting concerns it'll take years longer to deliver the jab to those in poorer countries. Now, vaccine nationalism is well and truly on display around the world as leaders race to protect their citizens first. Catalina Flores explains.
Well, millions of vaccinations have already been administered globally, but vaccine distribution is far from equal. So let's break down the numbers. Of the more than 7 billion doses bought worldwide, more than 4 billion have been snapped up by high-income countries, whereas low-income nations have secured just 270 million. The global initiative, known as COVAX, which will distribute free vaccines to poorer countries to cover 20% of their population, has purchased more than 1 billion. In other words, rich countries, which account for around 14% of the world's population, have secured more than half of the most promising vaccines.
All the data would show you that equitable distribution of vaccines line up with best results from a health, economic, and humanitarian perspectives, but it really goes against what many countries are starting to do and what their populations are demanding, which is trying to get as many vaccines for themselves as quickly as possible.
Canada has ordered the most vaccines relative to its population, enough to jab each Canadian 5 times. The US will have enough to vaccinate their population twice over. Australia has bought enough to give citizens at least 4 doses each, but it's pledged funding to help the rollout in Pacific Island nations. So too New Zealand. The country has enough to vaccinate its people 3 times over. Meanwhile, the African Union has ordered less than half of what's needed to reach herd immunity. And Latin American countries, not including Brazil, only have enough to cover 1 jab each for less than half their people.
At the minute, of course, demand has greatly outstripped supply. So in a scenario like that, you generally will find the most powerful and richest countries getting to the front of the queue quickest.
And vaccines aren't going to countries where the infection rate is highest. For example, Japan, Australia and Canada have reserved more than 1 billion doses, but the 3 countries combined account for less than 1% of all current COVID-19 cases.
It does look like low and middle income countries are going to be waiting 2, 3, 4 years to reach herd immunity through a vaccination. We're hoping to, of course, make that a bit more accelerated by ensuring that there is more sharing of vaccines, but also by ramping up manufacturing.
So, while vaccine nationalism appears to be gaining traction around the world, experts say it's in the interest of every person that vaccine globalism becomes a priority.
The Reserve Bank says Australia's economic recovery is faring better than expected, but still expects soft wages growth and soft inflation in the immediate future. The RBA governor says the bank won't touch interest rates until consumer prices reach its target band of between 2 and 3%, and that's not currently in its forecast.
We do not expect it to be before 2024, and it's possible it will be later than this. So the message is interest rates are going to be low for quite a while yet.
Low interest rates are bolstering house prices, which Dr. Lowe said encourages additional residential construction, which we saw in today's numbers from the Bureau of Statistics. Dwelling approvals in December hit a record high for houses and a 33-month high for units, with the government's home builder grant inflating activity. Well, stay tuned. We'll be back after the break.
Every day a new adventure. That's my motto.
February Fantasies continues with Pan's Labyrinth. Tomorrow 9:30 on SBS World Movies.
Ernie is back at it again for another remarkable Australian adventure.
An absolute pleasure.
Going places with Ernie Dingo. Saturday 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
My mum's in ICU with COVID. We visited her a few weeks ago, but I didn't know that I had COVID. I had no symptoms. A week earlier, my mate cooked dinner. Tom said he'd just had a cold. He works with Sophie. He said she just had a sniffle. We all had COVID and didn't know it. We can't change that, but we can all change what we do in the future. Be COVID safe and save lives. Visit health.gov.au. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Hello. No. Have a good day. Shut up and take my money.
New James Squire Broken Shackles Refreshing Lager.
Snooze members save up to 40% off RRP. Save up to 40% off mattresses and up to 40% off bed frames. Hurry, the Snooze member event is now on.
It's amazing what a little snooze can do.
Terry Shear, Australia's leading landlord insurance specialist, provides the cover you need for your property and rental income.
As a first-time investor, Terry Shear provides the security I need.
Call Terry Shear or go online. Leave behind a world of chaos and confusion. Find solace in the new year with the Poor Clares of Arundel, with their new album, Light for the World. Light for the World. Out now.
Not only are we sleeping less, we are sleeping worse.
Are we sleepwalking into a sleep crisis?
The link between sleep and weight is getting stronger.
Michael Mosley, The Truth About Sleep. Tomorrow 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
Now to some breaking news, and Victoria's Premier Daniel Andrews has announced a number of restrictions in the wake of a hotel quarantine worker testing positive to COVID-19. They include limits on gatherings and masks mandatory in indoor settings.
From 11:59 p.m. tonight, Cabinet has endorsed the advice of the Chief Health Officer to reinstate the Black Rock or New Year's Eve settings, so private gatherings 15 only, masks inside, across all inside, whether it's a private or a public gathering, masks should be worn inside. And also, I want to give notice to those employers and employees that we are pausing the scheduled shift to 75% private sector on Monday and 75% public sector on Monday as well.
Daniel Andrews there. To the weather now in the major centres. Showers with a possible storm in Darwin, a possible shower in Brisbane, partly cloudy in Alice Springs in Sydney, a shower or two in Canberra, becoming cloudy in Melbourne, showers in Hobart and Adelaide, sunny in Perth. Looking further afield, partly cloudy in Auckland and Wellington, thunder in Samoa, Nadi and Tahiti. In Southeast Asia, fog in Bangkok, rain in Kuala Lumpur and Honiara, windy in Singapore. Further north, fine in Beijing and Hong Kong, cloudy in Seoul and Taipei, fine in Tokyo. Heading west, cloudy in Baghdad and Tehran, thunder in Delhi, rain in Jerusalem. To Europe, fine in Athens, snow in Moscow and Stockholm, drizzle in Berlin and Belgrade, showers in London. In Africa, partly cloudy in Algiers, Casablanca and Nairobi, cloudy in Lagos, thunder in Johannesburg. In South America, cloudy in Bogota and Lima, rain in Asunción and Rio, fine in Santiago. And for North America, fine in New York, Chicago and Miami, foggy in LA, partly cloudy in Toronto and also Havana. Well, some of North America's current snowstorms are the heaviest in years, and while most of us would prefer to be inside in that sort of weather, a 10-year-old boy from Providence, Rhode Island, saw an opportunity to say thanks to hospital workers fighting the pandemic. Christian Stone and a friend went to the staff car park of the local hospital and they began clearing the centimetres deep snow from the vehicles so the essential workers could get away quickly after their shifts. His reason was a simple one.
I was just thinking, they help us a lot. They've been helping us a lot through this whole pandemic, and I figured, why don't we help them?
Christian says while some of the staff offered to pay them, the satisfaction of doing a good job was reward enough. Can you say that again? That's The World this Wednesday. I'm Darren Mara from the team. Good night.